think you can.
Okay, well, we're back, aren't we? Right, here we go. So the end of this module, we're going to be able to source the safe system assessment guidelines that are available, some Austra's guidance, and a couple of jurisdictions around Australia have guidelines, and I'll show you those. Then we're going to talk about the safe system assessment matrix. This is the meat of a safe system assessment. We'll show you how to do the reporting, so in that matrix, but also in the other parts of the report. And then we're going to jump into categorizing treatments. So in a safe system assessment, you don't just assess, but you make some recommendations or ideas for a project team. And we're going to categorize those into supporting or primary. And don't forget to count your wallies. But before I do that, I do want to touch, I've been through and marked all the assignments, and you probably got that feedback this morning. Now, yeah, we talked a little bit about some of the things earlier on, but there were a few things just to clarify, which a few people didn't quite get right, but they're a bit tricky. One especially tricky one is, hopefully my pen's working, yeah. So distance, so this obviously is a road, there we go. Distance to travel for a pedestrian across the road. Quite a number of people wanted to put that as exposure. So, you know, maybe some curb out stands or something, that reduces the exposure. It's actually a likelihood factor in a safe system assessment. I can completely understand why people wanted to put that as exposure, because the pedestrian spends less time on the road, so less exposure. But remember, because the way a safe system assessment works is number of pedestrians equals exposure, right? Assuming that all those pedestrians still cross the road, okay, that's less likely to be struck because they're out there for less time. So that one has been quite a topic of controversy amongst the industry for the last like 3 or 4 years, because very much traditionally, if you'd ever done a safe system if you'd ever done a road safety analysis or the like, you would have called that exposure. You know, the pedestrian is exposed to crashes for more time. But the reason it's had to be extracted out into likelihood is because otherwise we're going to double count, because we're sort of going to count the number of pedestrians and then the amount of time that they're on the road, plus all the other likelihood factors. So we don't want to double count, so we just separate it out that way. So I hope that makes sense. And the same goes for like if there was an intersection here and it was a very large intersection compared to a very, you know, small intersection. It's the same, the same concept. So that was one particular one that I just wanted to bring up. Happy to answer questions if anybody has on the feedback, or you know, was a bit confused, you know, had their mind in one space. There was another one. Oh yeah. The other one, sorry, is the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework, which we'll show you shortly, has done a fair bit of categorizing of treatments into these primary and supporting, but they also have done the work in putting what influences exposure, likelihood, and severity for a whole lot of treatments. Now, you'll just find in that roundabouts tend to pop out as just severity influences. Now, I was pretty lenient in the assignment usually about that, because you know, we know roundabouts reduce conflict points. So by the nature of that, you'd say that they reduce the likelihood of crashes as well. Less conflict points is less likelihood. A few people actually wanted to put the number of conflict points into exposure, but no, most of you were onto that, saying that that's a likelihood factor. but then say, okay, so we're doing roundabout, less conflict points, less likelihood of crashes. And there's a lot of logic to that. And I was fairly sort of sympathetic to that. But if we're following the Austroads guidelines, I believe that the thinking behind it is that you get increased rear end crashes and sideswipe crashes if it's multi-lane and bits and pieces. Very minor incidents, these ones we're talking about, but the frequency of crashes sort of stays about the same between roundabout signals and, between a roundabout and passively controlled intersection to give way or stop. A little less for signals, but the severity profile is very different across those, being very high in the signals and the passively controlled, and very low with the roundabout. But yeah, as I say, if you want a bit more discussion on that, just jot in what your particular question is, maybe from your feedback or the like, and I'll happily jump onto that. Max.
Again, we've just had a good point from Sam regarding the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework, and within one of the tables, it does suggest under exposure that crossing width is taken into account for pedestrian exposure, and I'm guessing that is something that needs to be updated.
Yeah, so I had to write that into a number of people's. Now, I did mention it, I think, at one point in the sessions, but it probably didn't get the attention to it. So, well, first of all, prize for Sam for actually reading the Austroads guidance there. Yeah, that is one that has played out, and in the Victorian guidance, and I believe one of our fact sheets also tries to do this, because we just discovered we are double counting that risk if we utilize that. So industry's practice is now not to do that, and also you sort of discover length of road is taken more into account in the likelihood. But yeah, so well done.
Picker.
I'm trying to think whether one of our fact sheets specifically addresses that. Anyway, let's keep going. Thank you for that. So we've had a good discussion about the safe system. We've had a good discussion about the philosophy of it, the principles of it, the safe system diagram here that New Zealand is using, and a lot of the safe system assessment is just really putting those principles into some sort of order to be able to assess risks. So we talked about the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity, and that is what we'll be looking at. And really, a lot of what a safe system assessment is doing is quantifying these, putting scores to them, and getting that final risk score for different crash types. So that's what we'll be doing. And that severity one is very much associated with those biomechanical tolerable energy levels. So we've got the curves, but we've got this one, which is what I expect you'll be referring to a little bit in terms of different crash types, different speeds. You'll need a bit of professional judgment in terms of angles and things like that, but you've got some scores along there that you might be utilizing, and more, like trying to provide you with a good bit of data there on what sort of points crashes go really bad really quickly in speed. But really the question is, how do you do that safe system assessment? And this is the document there that Sam's obviously started to delve into, which is excellent. And you've got a copy of that on your memory stick and in Moodle. But of course, it's an Austroads document, so you can freely download that from Austroads' website as long as you've registered, and you can get all Austroads documents free these days. They used to cost money, but now they are free, which is great. So you'll see there over on the right, the tables, we've got a number of sections of a safe system assessment or some decision making around what you're going to do. The first one is what's the scale, purpose, and depth of the assessment? So, well, what's the purpose of the project, or why also are you doing the assessment? But what's the scale of the assessment and the depth of the assessment? Now, it is very scalable, the safe system assessment framework, because you can assess a very small splitter island, or you could assess using the same general methodology, a mine site, a remote community. You could do a whole program like a road safety program, a congestion easing program, a public transport program if you wanted. I mean, that'd be a massive exercise, but the methodology sort of holds true. The next thing sort of in there is, in this assessment, we want to understand the context of that project or whatever you're assessing. So lots of questions around what are the objectives of the project, function of the road, speed, environment, road users, what vehicles are present, land use, a whole lot of different bits and pieces like that. We really need to gather an understanding of what the context is in order to do an informed assessment, but also make logical recommendations and something that has a chance of being taken on by the project team. Then we get into the meat of the safe system assessment, the matrix. You can see exposure, likelihood, and severity there, and other safe system pillars or elements. Then we recommend some alterations to the project. So they've come up with a design. We recommend altering it if we think it can get better alignment with safe system principles with some alteration. And we talk about each alteration we suggest either being a primary treatment or a supporting treatment. Okay. So that was the Austroads guidance. I mentioned there that Victoria has some guidance, South Australia have some guidance, and it sort of goes a little bit to Sam's earlier point. The Austroads document was really written before people had been doing safe system assessments. And now with sort of thousands of safe system assessments done, there's been lots of situations and people have debated bits and pieces, and the Victorians and the South Australians have come up with guidance which clarifies a few things or makes some comments around some specifics of the Austroads document that don't, in theory might have been okay, but doesn't quite work in practice. And also just gives like jurisdictional context of when you would do safe system assessments and the like, which Austroads doesn't provide that because it's up to each jurisdiction to make their own decisions about when they would and wouldn't do these sorts of things. The next module, our final module, I'll talk about those sorts of policies that are in place and when it'd be valuable to do a safe system assessment and what the process is and those sorts of things from more a policy perspective or a management of an organization or a road controlling authority perspective. But these documents, you can have a flick through those. Obviously you're not subject to this in New Zealand, but New Zealand doesn't have specific guidance on a lot of issues at this stage. Just sort of identifies it as a good risk assessment methodology, a way of proving safe system alignment or improving safe system alignment. We'll leave it at that. So the first thing you do as a safe system assessor is, you've been asked to undertake a safe system assessment of a proposed, it could be proposed roundabout or something like that. And you've gathered your safe system assessment team together and you want to understand the context of the project. Now, Austroads provides these prompt questions and they're a good place to start. And what we will often do is just send those questions to the project team, or in your sort of inception meeting or an opening workshop, with the team, you ask these questions as prompt questions, and they're asking questions like, what's the reason for the project? Have you made any commitments about things like speed limits or access? What's the function of the road? What's the current speed limit? What's coming? Intersection types, parking, public transport, land use. What else we got in there? Oh yeah, all the road users are there. What are pedestrian numbers, cyclist numbers? Are there school children, elderly? What are the vehicle compositions, vehicle data? Just asking lots and lots of questions to try to gather the context of the project, but also the road environment. Oh yeah, the movement of place categorization is a great one to ask at this stage. And you're taking that also, you can go away and assess the road in that context, but also make some good recommendations. What I want to do now is just sort of show you one of the key outputs of a safe system assessment, and then I'll jump back to how we got to that output. All right. So this is sort of one of the outputs we'd expect to see in a safe system assessment, and this one, you can easily see now it's an intersection, and it's got 3 design options, one being a roundabout, one being some sort of modified T, which is signalized, and some sort of T intersection that is signalized. And so what we see there is the red is the existing conditions, and then obviously orange is a roundabout, blue is the modified T, and grey is the normal T. But what the graph shows here is safe system alignment score, and then the crash types, but I'll come to that. Safe system assessment score is like, I want you to think of it as crash risk. So higher is worse. You want low crash risk, don't you? You want low safe system assessment scores. Okay, that's what we're aiming at. The crashes here are run-off road, head-on, intersection, pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists, and then this other category to cater for anything that you have looked at and concerned about that doesn't exist in those other categories. And that could be a sideswipe crash, it could be a crash with an animal, it could be a rear end crash if it's not generated from an intersection. So if it's a mid-block rear end, so maybe a pedestrian crossing, maybe, probably pedestrian crossings are usual one that might pop into that as a rear end. But if you're worried about rear ends from queuing at an intersection, well, that actually lands in the intersection category. So you can see there, immediately, without knowing anything about this project or anything like that, that we can sort of get a gauge for what's performing well in different crash types and what's performing not so well. So I can see there that the roundabout looks like it's sort of performing pretty well over the others for most categories, but probably not for cyclists and other, and you need to dig in a little bit and see what the other is there. So that's the sort of output you want to be getting. But let's now go back and build. How do we start? How do we actually start to put numbers to these things? And we want to do it all in the safe system assessment matrix. And the matrix sort of looks like this. And we've got some dot points in there on some of the factors that influence the score you're going to put into each of these cells of this matrix. Now, they're not all the things that are going to influence that, but there are a few thought starters. But the 3 rows are exposure, likelihood, and severity. So that should be very familiar to you, and you should be very comfortable with that. You can see why I've been banging on about it over the earlier modules. We need to know what goes into which category: exposure, likelihood, and severity. And across the top, we've got those crash types that represent all of the death and serious injury in New Zealand. and the other, capturing anything else that's been missed. And so what we want to do is put a score between 0 and 4 for each one of these cells of the matrix. And what we've got there is exposure to runoff road crashes. So we're going to start right up at the top. Exposure to runoff road crashes. And it says AADT. Now for runoff road head-on intersection, those are passenger vehicle crashes, or passenger vehicle and heavy vehicle crashes. The vehicle crashes. So we can really go with AADT then, comfortably. Other is almost always passenger vehicle crashes and heavy vehicle crashes as well. Occasionally something else pops in there to and sneaks up on us, but the majority of the time you'll find the AADT there is the traffic volume. So the traffic volume, and say we've got a road and it's got 1,500 vehicles a day, AADT, 1,500 vehicles a day. We don't put 1,500 in this cell because that's not obviously between 0 and 4, is it? So how do we get from 1,500 vehicles a day to a number between 1 and 4? Well, we go to the scoring reference sheet. Okay, the scoring reference sheet. And this is a recreation of the scoring reference sheet, same words, a little bit different formatting. But we see the score, so 0, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and we see their exposure, likelihood, and severity. So let's have a look at exposure, and let's see what, we'll start with a 4. We'll start at the top end. Okay. Volumes of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are very high for the, or the road is very long. Therefore, exposure is very high. Now, what I'm going to do is actually just cross that out, because that, again, confuses people. For runoff road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is greater than 1,000 vehicles per day. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycle crash types, volume is less than 100. Sorry, it's greater than 100 units a day. So that is the key. That and that. We can see that for the others here, between 50 and 100 for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. 5,000 to 10,000 for vehicles is a 3. 2, between 1,000 and 5,000, and between 10 and 50 for a 2. Less than 1,000 vehicles a day for a 1. Less than 10. And a 0, there is no exposure to certain currents. That might mean there is no side flow or intersecting roads, no cyclists, no pedestrians, or no motorcyclists. So we said what that road had 1,500, 1,500. So that's between 1,000 and 5,000. So we're going to take that score of 2. Come back. I'm going to put a 2 there. So you can see exposures can be quite easy if you have your traffic volume. So we've got a 2 there. Head-on's also going to be a 2 because it's the same volume. Intersection may be slightly different. So if our 1,500 vehicle per day road crosses a road with, say, 5,000 vehicles a day, the intersection exposure becomes the addition of those two traffic volumes. So we go to 6,500 as the addition of those. And we go back to our scoring here. And okay, 2. Okay, that's actually between 5,000 and 10,000. So we're going to pop a 3 in for that one. Other, we're worried about sideswipe crashes. So we're back to using the main road that we're assessing. And then pedestrians. Okay, how many pedestrians are crossing? So this is an interesting one. You can see there from Austroads, they do have crossing width. I'm going to take that out. So yeah, so what are the number of pedestrians? What are the number of pedestrians crossing or walking along the road? And often you ask, what are your pedestrian counts? No, we don't have pedestrian counts. So you have to make a judgment call based on your site visit, based on, saying to them, okay, well, what is it, a popular pedestrian area? Are there lots of, is this schools in the area, or is it on pedestrian desire lines? You're asking lots of questions to try to gather a gauge for, we jump to here. Now, are we talking about moderate volumes, high exposure, very high exposure? So we're trying to gauge that. And you end up making a bit of a judgment call as to what might be there. They might have pedestrian counts. So we're going to make a judgment call. We're going to say this is a very sort of remote area, maybe. Didn't see any pedestrians out there on site, but talking to people, we know there's a few people who, walk the area occasionally, walk their dog. So we're going to give it a 1. We're going to say pedestrian volumes are very low. We're going to go less than 10 units a day. Cyclists, same sort of thing. Number of cyclists. The number of cyclists, same as pedestrians. You're unlikely to get those numbers. Maybe if you're doing an inner city one and they've got some councils, all those sorts of things, but most of the time you really struggle to get cyclist counts. So you make a judgment call. And let's say this one, they go, no, it's not really a commuter route. It's not a major cycle route. There's the occasional training ride through there, and there's the occasional commuter or somebody riding through. Let's give that we're going to give it a 1, maybe. Now, the pack of 30 cyclists that goes through there on the Sunday morning, I account for that in a completely different area of the safe system assessment, because it's not your sort of AADT style cyclist activity. It's there's a better spot in some qualitative questions to account for that. So then you do motorcyclists, and again, you're probably not going to get much good data on this, but you can generally say it's about 1 to 2% of AADT as a nice rule of thumb, and we'll just go with a 2 then as a result of that. So there you go. You got some numbers across the top. It's fairly straightforward. Don't overthink the exposure. Just go, what are the volumes? Correlate that to the score sheet. Put the number down. Any questions there, Max?
So far, so good. Thank you, Ken.
Okay. Right. The next one we want to look at is likelihood. Now you can see some of the factors in there influencing likelihood: speed, geometry, shoulders, barriers, offsets, guidance and delineation, etc. And etc. is important because there's lots and lots of other things that could be influencing the likelihood of run-off road crashes in this case. And so then you're looking at your your road environment. And you say, okay, yeah, okay, well, the speed, let's say it's 60 km/h. Speeds, the geometry is good, shoulders are good. They've got generous shoulders, fairly straight alignment. There are no barriers. Hazards are offset, quite far off the edge line. It's got good line marking, good delineation, good lighting, good signage. All of these good aspects are there. So we say, okay, well, let's jump to our likelihood column. What does a 1 look like for likelihood? What is 1? It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Okay, that's interesting. 2, it is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. We're not really getting much guidance here, are we? What about 3? It is likely that a crash type will occur. This is not helping us a huge amount. 4, some more words here. Okay. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place. E.g., high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering across several lanes of traffic, high speed. Okay, so we're looking at some sort of serious infrastructure deficiencies there, or operational deficiencies as well. Let's go back all the way to a 0. There is only minimal chance that a given crash type will occur for individual road user error given the infrastructure in place. Only extreme driver behavior or substantial vehicle failure can lead to a crash. This now, again, a thing that Austroads has said, which we don't play out because, but it says there, this may mean that, for example, pedestrians of traffic do not cross at gate or pedestrians do not cross the road. Well, that is accounted for in there. Now, the thing is, we need to take into account humans being humans. And that means that if you get everything, all the lines and signs and everything right, you still can't put a 0 because we know people are going to fall asleep, people are going to be distracted, we're going to, I think whatever it is, the likelihood, you've done a really good job with the infrastructure to lower the likelihood, but it still presents some likelihood of crash. We did a fact sheet on likelihood because it is so subjective, and to try to get a bit more calibration to that. We're also doing other work to try to get a bit more sort of baseline scoring done for people to be able to grab. But I don't think I've ever used a 0 in likelihood in my safe system assessment time. It's always been a 1 if I'm really quite happy with everything from that likelihood perspective. But this one, 60 Ks, everything's looking pretty good, but still think that people might be falling asleep and leaving the road, or we might have some hoon activity going on. Or sorry, like hoon activity is a term I use. I think you would use like boy racer activity going on. So we're sort of trying to take a bit of that into account. So I'm going to go, it's unlikely. I'm going to go with a 2 here. Unlikely that a run-off road crash will occur based on that infrastructure that's in place. And then you go through and you do that for all of them. And we look at there, okay, so we're going to say that the likelihood of head-on crash, well, maybe we say the likelihood's a little higher because the vehicles maybe are they're closer to each other, just separated by a center line here. But the volume, this is probably one of the areas where you're going to take volume into account in likelihood to a degree, but the volume is low. Usually anything to do with volume would be in exposure, but yeah. So let's say a 2 on that one as well. Intersections, you're going to analyze, okay, what's the sight distance like? What's the approach speeds? Is there good warning signs? Is it clear? Are the angles of approach bad? All of that sort of stuff, and maybe you end up giving that one a 3 as well, because you're a bit more worried. You've got those issues going on. Other, you've decided it's side swipes. Maybe there's a merge, a bad merge point. Maybe a merge over a crest or something like that. And so maybe you end up saying, yeah, I'm really worried about this, and I'm going to put a 4 on it. Because if you go, it's highly likely that that's going to occur. Pedestrians, you're going, well, even though there's very low pedestrian numbers, you're still saying, well, what are the pedestrian facilities? What are the facilities, the separation? How many conflict points are we talking about? Factoring in the speed, and you're looking at all of that, and you go, well, actually, there's no pedestrian crossing facilities. And in the scheme of things, they probably decided not to invest in those at this location because the volumes are very low. But we don't put that into our mind as an assessor. We're just saying, what are the facilities like for those very few pedestrians that are there? And we look at that, no crossing, all of these sorts of things. Maybe we say a 3 or a 4 because we're really bad. I'm going to go with a 3 maybe because you've identified, well, actually, they do have really good space to walk away from the road. And it's pretty good sight lines at the points that they could cross. There's no refuge island, there's no actual crossing point and these sort of things, but it's in the scheme of things, it's not good, but it could be a little bit worse. Then you do the same for cyclists, and maybe you go, well, actually, they've got the sealed shoulders to work with and things like that. Maybe you go 3 there. And motorcyclists, well, motorcyclists tend to come out at pretty much, you can almost pick the highest of anything that came out in the runoff road head-on intersection other and use that for motorcyclists because they're covering off all of those crash categories in the one. And so the side swipe there and the merge point and those sort of things. So I'm going to go with a 4 from that side. And there you go, we've got some numbers there. But unfortunately, or fortunately, in a safe system assessment, it's just not as easy as just doing what I did and going, oh, I sort of think that, yeah, I'm going to go with a 4. You actually have to dot point and justify how you arrived at that score. The factors that made you think that through. So you've got to break down your thinking into lots of different dot points. I'll show you an example of that soon. But it's not as easy as and quick as just doing that. You've got to say, line marking is clear, signage is clear on both approaches, surface conditions good, lighting's good. There's sight distance challenges from a bush on this approach and this. So you're dot pointing all of that, then you end up saying 2 or 3. Then we go to severity and we go, okay, what's the severity of the crash now that it's happening? So you've taken all of this chance that it's going to happen and the number of vehicles or the number of pedestrians out of it. You say, right, how bad is this going to be when it does happen? Okay, so now a vehicle's left the road and they are crashing. We go here to our score sheet again. Let's look at what a 1 is in the severity. Should a crash occur, it is highly unlikely that it will result in fatality or serious injury. Highly unlikely for the kinetic energy, for the road users involved. Kinetic energies are low during the crash, or the majority are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. So that would be like energy would run along a barrier or be absorbed by a cushion or something like that, crash cushion or something like that. Let's see what a 2 is. Should a crash occur, it is unlikely that it will result in fatality or serious injury. A 3 is that it is likely, and a 4 is highly likely. 0, should a crash occur, there is only minimal chance of resulting in fatality or serious injury relevant road users. This might mean that kinetic energies are transferred during the crash. Kinetic energies that are transferred during the crash are low enough not to cause fatal or serious injury, or that is effectively dissipated or redirected so it doesn't go to the road user. now you look at the critical impact speeds for different crash types. Critical impact speeds for different crash types. And that is what we were talking about there. And those other graphs. So you can utilize this. So what we see here is road user exposure is not very subjective if you've got data. I mean, you might have to make a judgment call if you're not given the data. The likelihood is quite subjective and takes a lot of judgment from you assessing the area. Read our fact sheet on it, but you're really actually looking at it at a relative level. Because if you take crash likelihood on face value, everything is highly unlikely. Because crashes are rare, but what we're doing is looking at that at a relative sense based on the infrastructure. So you've got to be able to sort of calibrate that. I find road safety auditors, people who have been analysing the road for crash risk, crash likelihood for a long time, crash investigators, road people who've done crash reduction studies and the like. They're really good at this, really good at justifying it. They can go, oh well, I can see a see-through effect here, or the visual deceit that the road is deceiving, or the camber of that curve, or the crossfall of that curve's off, or the sight distance is inappropriate, and these sorts of things. They really hone in on these specifics that they know are going to influence the chance that a crash will happen. And the severity is sort of this combination of you've got to be able to predict the crashes at speeds and then utilize some of the, so there's the subjective part of it, and then utilize the data you've been given as less subjective. So it's a bit of a combination. And so then we might go back to our one, we're talking about 60 kilometres an hour and the vehicles are leaving the road and they're crashing. Well, I've said that there's big cleared area, but we're still saying that they're crashing now to reportable crashes. So they're either rolling over in that cleared area or they're making it all the way to the trees. So in that crash event, I'm going to go with, I reckon they would have washed off some speed, 60 kilometres an hour down before they hit the tree, but maybe they're rolling over, but that's a less severe crash type than hitting the tree. I'm going to give it a 2 in the end. So I think, oh no, I might go with a 3 in this hypothetical scenario. Unlikely to result in fatality or serious injury. I think it's likely that it will, when that crash happens, either rolling over or getting to the tree. So I'm going to give it a 3 there. Now, if I went to the thing and I said, okay, what do we got here? We've got car, pole, or tree is one that I was interested in. I don't have car and roll over here, but I know it's less severe than that. And, what are we saying here? This is a 60 kilometre per hour road. So it's sort of somewhere sitting in there. I've got red on red. That's not going to come up too well. There, maybe a 3. But I'm saying that, to get to that tree, they might wash some speed off. So maybe it's more somewhere down here, but I think a 3 is sort of reasonable. There, maybe you've got some vehicles going a little faster when they leave the road, but they're going to wash off some speed. So you can see the sort of, there's a bit of variability to it. Then we go to head-on and we go, oh, head-on crashes. All right, we're talking head-on crashes. Where do they come into it? Oh, head-on car to car. That's interesting. Oh, gee, okay, that's quite high, and maybe a 3, maybe even a 2 potentially. 60, 50. Where are we at with that? And then you might say, well, head-on car versus heavy vehicle. Okay, that's even worse. What's our percentage of heavy vehicles? So you can see the way I'm sort of something changing a little bit there. Maybe I'll go and decide, actually, I'm going to go at 2 there. I'm going to go intersection. I'm going to go with 3 based on going back and forth. I'm going to go 1 for the side swipe crash because we know those are very, bouncing off a bit, the minor crashes. Pedestrian being struck at that 60 kilometre, I'm going to 4, 4, and I'm going to go 4 because I've got vulnerable road users involved, and I don't even look at this, and I know that all the vulnerable road users are sort of sitting in this section. I know our speeds are up here, and so I know everything's going to be up in that category. So then you've got there lots of dot points on how you arrived at these scores, lots of scores, and you do this. Take your exposure and you multiply it by your likelihood, and you multiply it by your severity. And so then we go 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, and that is our score. This one we go 2, 2, 2, 9. And so on and so on. And you do that for all of your scores, and then you add them up. And you get a final score out of 448. Now there's some interesting. Why did they put numbers to this rather than the way we'd usually do a risk matrix and put sort of highs and mediums, lows, or likelihood, likely, probable, the like, and they went with numbers. And there's some beauty to the utilization of numbers. Because if you put a 0 in any cell, what's anything multiplied by 0? It's 0. So if you were to say, well, there are no intersections in this section that we're looking at, so the score there is 0, the end result's going to be 0. It doesn't matter what the likelihood of crash is and the severity of crash because there's no intersection. It's 0. Likewise, if you could absolutely hand on heart say there will not be any crashes, put a 0 there. You don't care what the exposure is or what the severity is because there will be no crashes. Likewise with severity, if you're absolutely confident to say when these intersection crashes happen, they're all going to be at low speed and well within tolerable levels. In that case, you don't care what the exposure is or the likelihood because when all these crashes happen, they're not going to result in death and serious injury. Now, of course, with that one, I mean, that's the sort of pure safe system thinking as we go, okay, lots of crashes. Our community is still alive and healthy. But, of course, managing a transport network, you don't want lots of minor bingles and all of that going on. So you'd probably have a look at that anyway. But from a pure safe system perspective, we're sort of okay with that. So that's how you get to scoring. But in the matrix, and here's a little snip of a sort of very simple one, I'll probably actually, Max, we'll have a break very shortly to fill the coffees up. I might even at that point jump to a completed safe system assessment just to show the report and sort of how much detail you can go to in justifying the scoring that you're at. But you can see there a snip of a matrix, and I don't expect people to be able to read this, but exposure, likelihood, severity, dot points under each of them, dot points, not as much in the exposure because it's just saying, based on the volumes we were given and the Ostrodes, it's a 3. It's a 3. This one had to justify getting to a score of this point, and they've gone 2.5, and that brings up another point. we discourage going to a 0.5, but you are allowed to do it. You cannot go to any more precision than a 0.5, than a half. The reason for that is it's intentionally broad brush, this approach. And yeah, to be more precise than that is just not, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So maximum precision is a 0.5 if you must. Is there a question for me, Max?
Sorry, no, I'm just reading through the chat, so I think we're all good though. I'll respond offline.
No worries. Well, I'll talk a little bit more on this, and then we'll take a 5-minute break so people can get their coffee. Yeah, so you can see lots of justification, dot point, and scoring, total score there out of 64. So it would be the 4 and the 4 and the 4 would be your maximum. And then those are all added up, add, score out of 448. So let's take that break now, because it's a good time before I sort of jump into a few worked examples and show you a live one. But do have a think about any questions you'd like to ask at this point. But we'll take 5 minutes. You all right with that, Max? 5 minutes, okay?
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, back in 5 minutes. Hey, Max.
Hello, Ken. Had a
I
good
was just
question in
having,
the chat, yes, regarding the crash history.
yeah, I was just reading that. It's an interesting one, crash history, because I'll admit when I do a safe system assessment, I will have a look at the crash history, but it's not determining my scoring. But it can be useful to gauge which crash types and road users might be present if there's things you've missed. But you certainly don't want to be driving your numbers based on crash history, because, and Max had answered this in the chat, because if there's no crashes, it doesn't mean that everything's necessarily going to be low. Also, you can't say likelihood. You couldn't say there's been no crashes, so the likelihood of crashes is low. Well, that hasn't taken into account exposure or severity. So, yeah, just be very cautious on crash history. And in fact, our industry is moving, quickly away from crash history as our way to identify crash risk. Okay, it's still valid if you have an intersection with a whole lot of crashes. There is obviously risk there and risk into the future. But the more contemporary ways to identify risk is utilizing road infrastructure characteristics that we know present risk. So those could be volume, traffic volume, the speed, the geometrics, the presence of different, features, and methodologies like Kiwi RAP or IRAP. So these are the Kiwi Road Assessment Program, International Road Assessment Program, and those sorts of things. They're not crash-based. And, the transition's also because, you've got State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Timaru or something. You're going to have crashes dotted all the way along that, right? And you're going to have maybe a few points where there's a little bit of cluster. Now, there may be reasons why those clusters, you'd look at that, there might be an infrastructure deficiency. But you are just getting these lightning strikes all along that road, right? So you don't, yes, at a whole level we go, there's lots of crashes there. But if you find a section of a kilometre and it hasn't had any crashes yet, I don't think any of us would say that there's no risk there or low risk there. To say it hasn't actually just presented itself yet with a death or a serious injury. Anyway, there's a couple of really interesting Austroads reports on this. One was was analysing. Yeah, actually, I think it was analysing the federal black spot program from the Australian government, which was a crash-based program, and the qualification of a site had dropped to 2 crashes. The 2 crashes qualified the site for investment. And what so you're getting these sites, they had 2 crashes in a sort of general area, and they gave that a funding to upgrade that site. What the report showed was that the evaluation came back of the program and said, it's doing pretty well, or whatever. It wasn't the best evaluation, because the Austroads then report and more comprehensive look at things showed that the regression to the mean of these sites was why they were improving. In fact, you didn't need to spend any infrastructure money, and they would drop from, a lot of them would drop from 2 to 1 or 0 by themselves due to the regression to the mean, the statistical way that things would work. So that is just not enough crashes to really show you that there's infrastructure specific deficiencies in this location. Some of them, yes, they would have had that, but some of them, it's not quite there. So using other metrics is really the way we're pushing forward. With that being said, if some of those had 10 crashes, you go, yeah, okay, now we're talking. But we don't want to have to wait for those crashes, do we? We want to be able to proactively, systematically iron them out of the system. So quite a complex space. I worked with a New Zealand company, Ably. Some of you probably worked with Ably before. Worked with them on an Austroads project. So we partnered up with them on an Austroads project. Best practice in road safety infrastructure programs. So if you're interested in that sort of transition between crash-based programs, proactive programs, and that thinking, I really suggest you have a look at that report that we did. I can send you a copy, or it's an Austroads. It was Austroads work we were doing. It unpacks that in a lot of detail. Okay, Max, can I continue on?
All good, thank you, Ken.
I went off on a tangent on infrastructure program planning. All right, so we're talking about the matrix, and so the thing is, you will be given a site, and you'll be given designs. You may be given one design to upgrade the site, or you may be given multiple designs. So, like, take this one for example. Here we go. We've got an intersection. It's on a sort of sweeping curve there. Looks like it's a give way controlled, a passively controlled intersection. It's got some power poles, bit of footpath. It's got some lighting there. You can see some lighting, some sort of structure there. Oh yeah, it looks like a drainage style structure of a creek or something, and a bridge. And that was the existing conditions, and then they're planning to build a roundabout here. Well, that's one of their ideas. And there you go. They've done a little. That's how a roundabout could fit in there. They go, oh, we're also thinking of signalising it like this. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's how you can do that. They go, oh, we're also thinking of making it a conventional T intersection and signalising that with some slip lanes, and that's how that would look. So what you do in your safe system assessment process is you go back to the existing conditions. You put the designs aside. There you go. Okay, let's have a look at the existing condition. What's the exposure? What are your traffic volumes? What's the exposure? What's the likelihood of crashes? So what are some factors that are going to make me want this likelihood score to go up? What is increasing the chance of crashes in the existing conditions? Is it the lack of sealed shoulders, or faded line marking, or the speeds, or the geometry? What are factors that are making me want to decrease this? Oh, it's got the good lighting. It's got good warning signs. It's very good sight distances, or whatever it is. You dot point some of those out. And you put your score in. And you'd go through and you do that for all of them. Dot point what increases, what decreases. You do that for severity. What increases the severity of crash here, and what decreases the severity of crash here? So you're showing what are the pros and the cons of each of these, and you get your scores. And so you've filled that out. And then what you do is you say, all right, give me that roundabout design. And now I'm going to copy this whole existing conditions matrix. Do it. Control C. Copy the whole thing. Paste it. Control V. And then I modify it. I alter it. So I cross out features that when they've built this roundabout exactly as they've designed it, well, that's not going to be an issue anymore. And that's not going to be an issue anymore. That one's not an issue anymore. Oh, but we've got to add these things in red. So you see, we're doing strike throughs. We're doing red for new stuff, changing words here and there, changing the numbers. They're going red if they've changed. So you're you're basing it all off the existing conditions. You do that for the roundabout, and you get your next design, you copy that existing conditions matrix, you paste it, and you modify this one. So always taking that existing conditions, that baseline, and modifying it. You don't take one of the other ones, you get the existing conditions and modify it. You modify this one, that's gone now, that's been added, oh, that's been added. You do that for a few of them, for as many designs as they give you. And then you're able to produce overarching scores and comparisons. And you can see there the existing conditions, 118.5. See, the roundabout comes out at 90, modified T signalized 99, 105 for T intersection. So you can immediately see there that the roundabout, as they've designed it, as per each of their designs, has the highest alignment with safe system principles of this location, then the modified T, signalized, and the conventional T. But all of them are better than the existing conditions in terms of alignment with safe system principles. And you might present that however you want. You can present the overarching as a graph if you want, like this. But then you do present it like this. And this is what people are looking for. They want to see okay, well, where are the scores coming from? But then you don't stop there, because each one of those designs could get a better score, couldn't it? I mean, we can see that immediately from this. They've all got numbers to them. How do we reduce those numbers? What could we do? What can we change? And this is where you make recommendations. And I stress here that your recommendations are what could be changed in their design. So if they're going to build the roundabout, what could we add? What could we add maybe to reduce the cycling score? What could we add to reduce this other score, whatever it is? What could we do to reduce motorcycle score? For the modified T, how can we get this number down? Could they raise the intersection? Could they, do they need to do extra mast arms? So you're going through and you're coming up with lots of ideas on alteration. And for each one of those ideas, we categorize them into either primary or supporting. Now, you're not going to be recommending non-safe system treatments, we hope. So that's in there a bit more for terminology. But what you're going to do is either say, yep, that treatment that I'm proposing is primary because it virtually eliminates the potential for fatal or serious injuries occurring in association with that crash type that we're concerned about, or we're particularly focusing on. A supporting treatment is anything that improves the overall level of safety, but is not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury crashes occurring. And this little clause, which is not often activated, but does not change the ability for a primary treatment to be implemented in the future. But let me explain this a little bit more because it can be very confusing. And then the other thing is, Max, we might want to pull up the Ostroad Safe System Assessment Framework because those tables that they have are going to be very useful for people trying to get their head around this, which is a bit difficult. But the primary treatments are virtually eliminating the potential for fatal serious injury associated with the foreseeable crash type. So this is really going to have to get us to safe system energies within those tolerable levels that we talked about. Okay, so either you're going to have to slow vehicle speeds down, you're going to have to completely separate. That would be another way to do it because there is no ability for that crash to happen. Or you're going to have to get the angles of crashes and these sorts of things, the energy down. So what we tend to put into these categories are things like raised pedestrian crossings when you're going to get speeds way down and the likelihood's way down and everything's good, or roundabouts, for passenger vehicle crashes and the like. One common mistake people make is that they think about the issue and not the crash, the foreseeable crash type. So here's my little example. And, we've got car parking. Right? So they go, oh, car parking's blocking the sight distance out of this intersection, right? The recommendation we're making is to remove these 2 car parking spots, opens up the sight line. And they want to call that a primary treatment because they've removed the issue. They've removed the issue, but they have not virtually eliminated the potential fatal serious injury occurring associated with intersection crashes, have they? They made it less likely. So that's very clearly a supporting treatment. It's a supporting treatment. And in fact, anything that really is only addressing the likelihood of crashes, so lighting, line marking, anything to do with traffic signals, these are all supporting treatments. Because you're not managing the speeds, the angles, the energy, basically, within tolerable levels, or you're not fully separating. There's still the conflict points there. So there's a couple of little tricks there. Yeah, think about that. Is it only addressing the likelihood of crashes, and then it's going to be a supporting treatment, or am I still outside of those tolerable levels? And then the non-safe system is just anything that makes the whole situation worse, or does really, really reduces the ability for a primary treatment to go into the future. That one, again, doesn't get used that much. Okay, Max, before I jump onto some of the wider safe system assessment prompts, I don't know, have you grabbed the Austroads guide there? Do you want to share your screen? Because I think it's probably the hardest thing for people to get their head around new to this is what's primary and what's supporting. So
that's all good. Do you mind just making me co-host again?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just
playing a bit of tag this morning.
No, I've changed it to allow everybody to present. Hopefully you can do that now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Ken. Hop up. So the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework. Might just need to zoom out. Is that clear on your screen there, Ken? Thank you very much. So this is what we've been running through all of today, and just those treatment tables that Ken referred to. I just want to point them out just to show you exactly where to find them, because they're just such a useful resource. So they're hidden here in 4.6, treatment hierarchy and selection. So if we click on that one there, and what we actually have here, if we scroll through, we have tables for each of the crash types, so run-off road, head-on, intersection, etc. And then we have a hierarchy of treatments. And you'll also see in the right-hand column is that E, L, and S. So everything that we've been working on is it's all coming together in this table here. So this first table is for run-off road treatments, and it's suggesting what can be implemented both at a primary level, so safe system primary treatments, and those are things like flexible roadside and median barriers, very highly compacted roadside surface, very gentle side slopes, and very low speed environments. And you'll see that those are affecting likelihood of severity, or where the barrier is proposed just as severity. So that kind of goes back to that conversation, how different treatments affect exposure, likelihood, or severity. The two next rows are regarding supporting treatments. They've kind of been split up into this. It's a little bit confusing, and you don't need to go into that detail, but both of those rows refer to supporting treatments. If you are interested into that breakout, we can have a conversation about that, but basically you can use either of those rows as supporting treatments ideas. So you can look at wide sealed shoulders with audio tactile, non-flexible safety barriers, so maybe a more rigid barrier system, skid resistance improvements, audio tactile, vehicle activated signs, etc. So you've got this whole suite of treatments that you can refer to if you are looking at providing recommendations. There's also this other row, just other considerations, speed enforcement, rest area provision, and yeah, just making sure all the lane marking is compatible with vehicle technology. So just other things to consider within that space. But as I mentioned, there's tables for each of the different crash types, so super useful. So if you're getting a really high intersection score and you want to work out what can I do as a primary treatment to reduce that score, let's have a look and see what we can possibly propose. Ken.
Thank you, Max. And yeah, that's a really helpful resource as you're going about it. So I'll jump back into it unless there's any questions.
I think we're all good. Thanks, Ken.
All right. So the next thing in a safe system assessment that I want to point out is that you don't stop at the matrix. You ask these qualitative questions, and as an assessor, you answer them. So what Ostroads have sort of asked them, they put them as prompt questions. And you can see there they're broken up into road user, vehicle, post-crash care. And the questions are trying to cover off the wider elements of the safe system and the interaction of your infrastructure project or other area with these wider things. And the questions are road users likely to be alert and compliant, and are there factors that might influence this? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels? Drugs, alcohol, speed, road rules, driving hours. What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? So maybe, is this in a remote area after a long, between areas, or is it in the urban environment where fatigue's not as much of an issue because there's a lot going on, but, it still can be an issue? Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? So that's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, that one played out in a very interesting way in a safe system assessment we were doing. Big $103 million duplication job. And you were doing the safe system assessment and said, can we talk to the local highway patrol? Asked the project team as part of our assessment. They said, yeah, that's fine. Had a chat with the local highway patrol, the police, rolled out the plot of the plan, said, this is the plan. Do you think you'll be able to, do your enforcement activities safely, or will you be able to enforce there? And they said, oh, no, there's no space for us now to put the booze bust, and there's, camera cars and things like that's going to be a challenge. And we went, okay, so what would you need? And had a bit of a chat about that. Okay, so and then we said, well, there's this big old stack site here. We could, maybe some alterations be done to that. And in the end, we were able to recommend to the project team, to look at creating a dedicated enforcement area using the old stack site. And the project team was able to, do some tweaks to their design, alterations to the barrier a little bit, open it up, and they were able to create basically a purpose-built facility for enforcement activities, all within the scope of their project. It really didn't cost them anything more in a $103 million project. There was basically no more cost, and a wonderful facility now that road is enforceable as well. Are there special road users, entertainment precinct, elderly, children, on-road activities, motorcycle route, distraction by environmental factors? So you might recognise that there's a nursing home there, and look at the features that are being designed and say, well, those are good for most of the population, but the elderly are going to find that very difficult, and they spark ideas then on what could be altered, what could be changed, how can we alter that? They may even give you ideas that you go, well, that's interesting, we better alter the score in the matrix a little bit based on that. The vehicles, what is the level of alignment? What level of alignment is there with the ideals of safer vehicles? This one is often one that really comes up when you're doing a whole community or a whole site, like mine site or something like that. You're talking about the vehicle safety features they've got and the like. I have seen safe system assessments where people have analysed the existing fleet that's going through an intersection. I go, it's probably just a representation of the area's sort of fleet, but I don't get too much out of this in many infrastructure projects. Are there other factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles? Is the percentage of heavy vehicles too high for a proposed or existing road design? Is the route used by recreational motorcyclists? Are there resources in the area to detect non-roadworthy overloaded or unregistered vehicles and thus remove them from the network? And can enforcement of those activities be conducted safely? And has vehicle breakdown been catered for? That one often pops in motorway safe system assessments and the like. And then post-crash care. Are there issues that may influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury? Congestion, access, stopping space. Again, most often comes out in motorway style assessments, but it's always a good one to look at. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? So this is one where you're now thinking, okay, somebody's been in a crash and a serious injury or the like, how quickly can we get there? And how efficient and good is the emergency medical systems we have in place? That's a bit, you're thinking outside the box there, aren't we? Certainly outside the pouring of concrete and barriers and lane widths and that sort of stuff. But, it's good for these projects that we're thinking about. I remember very early days of this style sort of process. We were advising on motorcycle crashes on the Coromandel area, which some of you'll know, beautiful area, but very popular with motorcyclists. And this question and the like sort of generated that discussion about how long it was taking to get to the injured motorcyclists and what could be done to improve the response time and the like. And the helicopter landing pads were put forward as ideas, and as I understand, some of those did end up getting built. It's a very different thinking to the way we approach road safety, but it's all part of the holistic system approach. Are other road users' emergency response teams protected during the crash event? Are drivers provided correct information to address travel speeds on the approach adjacent to the incident? Is there reliable information via radio or VMS? And then this last one, is there provision for safety systems based on modern information and communication technology, cooperative intelligent transport systems, and those sorts of things? That's a bit of one of the future, maybe, but also thinking about just comms ability of vehicles. Again, one that, some specific assessments, you might get very intensely involved in that. Like, I don't know, it's a new tunnel or something like that. But in a lot, you might go, I don't really know if there's anything here in this roundabout we're building that is relevant. But that's the thing. These are trying to be generic, trying to cover lots of different road types. So you might put, nothing of note or something like that as your answer. But the idea that somebody's thinking through all of this different stuff for every project is really good. And other things may arise. Max, any questions or comments?
I was actually about to just share an anecdote in the chat, but I might just chat over it. But in one example of an SSA, reviewed a design, and the proposed design actually had a higher score than the existing conditions, indicating that if they were to invest these millions of dollars implementing that particular intervention, they're not going to get an improved road safety benefit. And that should be ringing alarm bells to the project team that they should revisit their design and ensure that they're adopting some of the recommendations.
Yeah,
so
I think it's a good example, and it goes sort of all the way back to the second module where I showed that memo that I was producing out of Vic Roads about that, and that one you've done is exactly the same. It's okay, you can spend lots of money, and we're going to trade. So I would assume whatever project you were assessing there had some other objectives, and I'm, without knowing what you're talking about, I'm tipping the objective was to get more vehicles through there quicker.
It was some additional turn lanes, yes.
Yeah.
Already very busy signalised intersection.
Yeah, and that's important. I mean, if in the right context, that's what they're trying to do, and we don't, question that. But yeah, in order to do that, we're not going to trade off the health and safety of our community to do it. Do it in a way that keeps everybody safe. Anyway.
Another quick one that just came in there from Mitchell, and it might be easy just to chat over this one as well, but whether you can just say, a score of 100, that means it's got really good alignment of safe system principles. Anything below that's fantastic. 200, it's kind of good, or 300, it's not so good. It's not quite as easy to provide those kind of bands within the SSA framework. I'll let you answer that though, Ken, if you want.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the answer is no, not at this stage. And the reason for that is you saw how subjective, especially that likelihood scoring can be. And so, if I was, Max and I were to do the scoring, we'd come up with some score. Then if Mitch and crew did the scoring on the same one, they would come up with potentially a different score. And it's not to say either are wrong. All right, as long as we're, both teams are identifying the issues and things are coming out with the same sort of scoring. It's actually one of the reasons why we always do the existing conditions, because you're calibrating it off that existing condition scoring. That sets your calibration as a scoring team as to where things go from there. That being said, that we're working hard to try to get benchline calibration so we can start to do that, because that's obviously people's desire. Like, everybody wants to be able to say what's acceptable. And you go, well, it's not about what's acceptable. It's like, can we continue to push and go hard? But everybody seems to want that. So we're working on it. All right. Well, I just thought I'd show a quick safe system assessment. I randomly picked one out there from the big share folder point thing, Max, and it looks like it's one of yours.
That looks familiar. It's a nice road trip.
Yeah, is it the one that went bad? Could be.
No, I think all these designs were improving.
Okay.
From existing conditions. From memory.
From memory. Okay. So I just wanted to show people sort of predominantly what the matrix would sort of looks like in a more comprehensive one. So a bit of an exec summary, some description of the options. Okay. Then immediately can say, actually, Max, there you go. If they built option 2, things would go worse.
I misspoke. I forgot about that one. That was cheeky.
So you can immediately see there, without knowing this one, I wasn't involved in this one. Do nothing, baseline, 190. This one makes it worse. The others are better. Whatever that one, design option 4, that looks pretty good. And that's what I want to be seeing. That's giving me a nice story if I dig into that a bit more. Motorcyclists coming out high and not changing much. That's fairly common to see, unfortunately. Let's go down a bit further. Okay, nice little bit, something to describe what these options are in a bit of a map. There you go, they're the total scores you can see. I'm going to jump down here, table of contents, usual stuff. So a bit of a description of the process, the safe system. What was the assessment team? There, Max, Catherine and Twan. Site visit times, daytime and nighttime. That's interesting. So nighttime is, it's not specified in any of the guidance documents that you have to do nighttime. It's sort of, do what you want to do to gather an understanding of the site and be comfortable with your scoring. And so obviously on this one, Max and team decided that they wanted to see it at night as well. So that's good. So some background on the project. What is the project? This looks like a fairly decent sized project here. Some description of the existing conditions and the design options. So you're going to describe the options to make sure you're on the same page. Here we go. Here are the prompt questions we talked about. So some answers to those prompt questions from the Ostroads, just, gathering the context of the project. And there's the scoring reference sheet from Ostroads. And here we go. We're into the matrix. And you can see there the exposure. Okay, so they've sort of said, well, this is all out of Ostroads and it's all above 24,000. It's all going to be 4. So they don't need to, there you go, 4, 4, 4, 4. That and that. Pedestrians 1, 1, and 4. But then you can see the likelihood is not pointing a lot of them out. Now, this is for the existing conditions. Existing conditions in grey. Do nothing scenario. ... Lots of information, isn't it? Yeah. Didn't just put a dot point and say, oh, lane width is not good. Score of 2. No, they really gone and analysed it. And then we've got 2, 1, 3, 2.5 there. Same with severity. Dot points, lots of things, come up with the score, got the total scores. And they've done their existing conditions at 190. So then they've copied that and pasted it for option 2 in this case, whatever it was. Change the color, that's nice. That's just to help readability. But you can see there, these dot points still remain. These have been now added with whatever that is. So there's, increased likelihood there potentially. These things stay. This is, they've removed a little something, and that's gone up a little bit. They've decided that's enough to warrant going up a half point in the likelihood of run-off road crashes, and so on, crossing out and the like. And then they've looked at their second option, option 3, and they've done the same, and so on through however many options they were given. Summarized it there. And then, so I've done a bit of description as to why that's come out, which that's probably more than is often done in a safe system assessment, but this one probably had some specifics that the client was wanting to delve into. Then here are the safe system element prompt questions are, talking about those questions that I just went through. You notice there, they're not scoring them. They're just putting comments, notes. They might spark ideas, drugs, compliance, alcohol, different things, different information they've gathered from stakeholders or talking to people or their knowledge of the area. And then recommendations here. And so these are ideas for the project team to consider to improve this. Consider installing a roundabout on the old Barnawatha Road, an overpass link road, applicable to design option 5 and 4. So that's interesting. And then you put a project response column, but the blue text here, this must have been the project team responding. So this has been sent to them, they've responded, okay? And they might be saying they can do that, or they can't do that, or, they're doing this other thing instead. That is not the safe system assessment team writing this. That's the designer or the project team or whoever received the report. You leave that blank as an assessor. And another one. So pointing out a few ideas, and you can see here, these are primary treatments. They've got a list of primary treatments, and then a list of supporting treatments. And there you go. Okay, quite a few supporting treatments, and that's common to see because there are a lot of supporting treatments out there available. Signs, lines, marking, geometric changes, delving into it. Bit of a conclusion, some photos from the site. And so, crash history, just to give that general indication of what's existing going on, but that has not driven the scoring. It's sort of to help out with context and those sort of things. And what have we got here? Surrounding land use to get an idea of what's going on there, what might be coming in the future. So that's really just wanted to go through that, just a real one to show you predominantly that the matrix. There's a bit of detail in the matrix, a bit of thinking. It is not just a number, and the recommendations are categorized into that primary and support. Okay, so Max, I suppose just before we give people the details of the safe system assessment they're going to do, I thought I'd just do 2 more slides from me, 3 more slides from me, and then over to you to jump through Moodle, if that's all right.
Sounds good to me.
So what we have got here is a safe system assessment report should include these things. I don't need to go through this slide in detail because there are template safe system assessment reports available. And if you just use the template, you will make sure you're covering all of this off. So the template we're going to give you to use is one that the Victorian government produced, and they say you are welcome to put your own branding on it, change the colors, or whatever you want. Just let's all stick to the same headings and cover off the same information. So that's what the template you're going to get looks like, and Max is going to take you through that. We have modified, we haven't modified the template. We've crossed out some stuff we don't want you to spend the time doing because it's not going to prove your competency. It's just going to waste your time and my time marking it. So we decided we'd get rid of some of that. But what we're about to do is give you a design of a site that should be near your house or near your office or whatever address you gave us. And we're going to ask you to undertake this safe system assessment, or this pared back safe system assessment. But we're going to ask you to go to the site at some point in that to see how it operates, see what's going on. You probably know the site, but you'll be looking at it in a different context. Okay, they're going to build a roundabout here. I wonder how that's going to work. How are people going to now get from there to there? And okay, what about this? How are those large vehicles going to get around there? But when we go out there, we need to ensure that you're going to be safe. Now, each site we're giving you, we've looked at from done our own risk assessment of it, from a ability for an individual to go out there, and they can all be done extremely safely. Like, these are very safe sites from that perspective, but they're safe as long as you are using common sense and being responsible from a safety perspective out there. So we want you to wear your high-vis vest when you're out there. There's no need to be out there measuring lane widths or looking at the crossfall of the road, when you head down to look at that and these sorts of things. You're gathering that general understanding of how it operates and the road users and those sorts of things. Don't be a hazard yourself. So make sure people don't have to walk around you, walk on the road and those sorts of things. Park safely. Don't park blocking sight lines or making it so cyclists have to go into live traffic lanes and things. There's very quiet street parking available for these sites, and you can go there. And we put all this into a safe work method statement, plus some really, common logical questions or points like, do not go out there intoxicated. If you have to drive a long way, take rests. But if you had to drive a long way to get to your site, just tell us and we'll give you a site that's close to you. The whole point of the thing is to not make you have to travel or go far out of your way. So, but anyway, you're going to have a look at that safe work method statement, and Max will show you shortly in Moodle. You're going to have to agree that you're going to, act responsibly from a safe occupational health and safety perspective out there. Over to you, Max.
Thank you, Ken. I'll grab my screen and we've just got Moodle up here. So there is actually a quiz for today, module 4 quiz. Just get that out of the way. This one here. But as Ken was just touching on there, the safe work method statement is saved within this folder here. So please do download it, take a copy of it, and just read through it. If there's any of those line items that you don't feel comfortable with or you don't understand what they are saying, please get in touch. We want to ensure that your safety is paramount and make sure that you feel comfortable conducting the site assessment. So please do review that in detail. There's also mitigating measures, so ways that we can reduce the likelihood of any event occurring, and please make sure that you are adhering to all of those. Below that, there is an actual agreement, and this is kind of set up like a quiz, and it's only one question, and the question is, I agree to the terms and I will act responsibly in accordance with the safe work method statement. So please do that prior to attending the site, and that just gives us confidence that you have actually reviewed the swims and you are going to act in accordance with it. So please make sure that's done prior to actually putting on the boots and getting out the high-vis vest. But if we click on this module 5, complete your safe system assessment, you'll see here a bunch of files. The first two, everyone will need to download. So there's an SSA template and an assignment graph generator. So those are the two that everyone will need to download. And then you'll also see a whole bunch of different sites, and you'll be able to pick your name, which is written in brackets at the end. And that's the site that has been designed for you. So that's your specific safe system assessment site. So you only need to download the one that has your name against it. I'll jump first into the template so you can have a look as to see what that looks like. And as Ken mentioned, there's plenty of this template that we've deliberately struck through, indicating you don't need to fill it out. You only need to complete the highlighted section. So everything that's been highlighted is stuff that we will get you to fill out within this template. So as I just scroll through, you'll see a lot of the content has been struck through. We don't need an executive summary. Don't need to update the table of contents. We do need you to fill in the assessment team, and that should just be your name alone. So that should be pretty straightforward. Don't need to worry about the project context or any of the prompts. You won't know the project context or the reason that this project is being developed or anything like that, because it's a hypothetical situation. So, well, not all of them. Some are actually potentially going to be installed, but we don't need you to fill that out regardless. So we've crossed all of this section out. We do want you to provide a summary of the proposed work. So have a look at the design, discuss what the differences are from the existing conditions to the proposed design. You can dot point that, that's fine. Just making sure that you've captured the significant infrastructure upgrades, what's changing. And also I think it's important going forward if you're doing these safe system assessments, but including the drawing and the issue numbers. So if you say this is the drawing that we analysed as part of the safe system assessment, it was issue number 1 or issue number A or letter A. The reason for that is, as everyone who's worked within their space knows, that these designs are constantly getting upgraded and updated, and there's new revisions. And if you could clearly articulate which design that you saw and that you assessed, it means later on if someone picks up the report and says, how could this have got a score of whatever it was when there's all these beautiful features in this design? It's really important to communicate exactly what was assessed. So just one to note for the future. We'll get you to fill in this assessment summary. You will be analysing existing conditions as well as a design option, and you'll be creating your own graph as well. And I'll come back to how that graph is actually populated, but I'll just continue for the moment. You will have to do your own safe system assessment matrix. So you'll see the exposure, likelihood, and severity as we've been discussing. You'll see all the crash types along the header columns over there. We need to see scores for each of those crash factors, and we also need to see the reasons that you've justified for that score. So you may say there's a likelihood for a runoff road as a 4. You need to clearly detail exactly what factors increase the likelihood of that runoff road crash occurring, factors that decrease the likelihood of that runoff crash occurring. So this is an opportunity for you to just dot point exactly all the different features within that road environment that either increase or decrease both the likelihood and the severity. So all of that thinking that we've done up to date is now going to actually be applied in this safe system assessment matrix. Once you've completed your existing conditions assessment, you would copy and paste this same table, paste it onto the next page, and then do the assessment again for your design. So you'd have to have a look at how are things changing from the existing conditions to the design. You'd have to strike through elements of the or the factors that are no longer applicable. So you strike through them. That's not part of the design anymore. I can get rid of that. And also any additional changes to the design that are considered as factors, you would need to add them to the table as well. And you'd use a different text color. So previously we'd shown using red. You can use red as well. And that just clearly indicates to when we go to review this is the existing conditions, this is the design, and this is what's changing. You can see everything that's been crossed out and things that have been added in red. And for those who don't like multiplication too much or don't want to have to get involved in it, we've got a nice simple graph generator. So that was the Excel document saved in Moodle as well. And what you can do is you can add in all these sections that are kind of highlighted in that orangey, yellowish, olive color, I guess. So we can call this safety street that we're assessing, and you'll see that gets updated immediately in the graph. We'll say, just as an example, we analysed the existing conditions for runoff road. The exposure was high, the likelihood was very unlikely, but the severity was also very high, which gives us a score immediately of 16. So don't need to worry about getting the calculator out or having to do all the addition yourself. It will automatically populate this graph for you. And it'll just do the same example for the design conditions. So it's going to have the same exposure. You're increasing the risk for the runoff road crash, and the severity stays the same. So you can see in this just quick example, our design option is showing a poorer alignment with safe system principles. So what you can do is then you can copy this graph once you've completed both the existing conditions and your design, and you can copy that into that little section that we showed here before. You can fill in this table, what are the scores that you've got for your existing conditions and your design, and just do a little spiel about what were the kind of key factors that led to those scores in this section here. At the bottom of the document as well, we have treatments to improve the safe system alignment. So those were those primary treatments and supporting treatments. That Austroads reference is really handy within this space. So we just ask you to fill in some different examples that you could think of within this space that the project team could potentially consider. Don't need to worry about the project response, just treatments for consideration, both primary and supporting. And the last thing is, we'd just like to see a photo of you out on site dressed in your high vis. So feel free to take a selfie just as proof that you actually went out there on site. And it's also just nice to see our participants out there and engaging in this road safety work and actually being part of the safe system assessment from start to finish. So we'll get you to add in a photo there as well. Once you have completed all that, you go back to Moodle, and at the bottom of this page, there'll be an add submission. Oh yeah, it's there for me as well. Add submission, just click on that and you'll be able to upload the file and we'll get a notification saying that it's ready to review. I will just show you just an example of what these designs looks like. So I'll just pick one out at random. So this one actually looks like it could potentially be something that's in the pipeline. This could potentially be installed. So that's just something to note. But if you do get approached by a member of public, please this is just a training exercise. You don't need to get into any details of the project. Just mention that you're here for project development for yourself, personal development. But you'll see in every design that we do provide, we give you this little text box just stating that the following traffic volumes, they're not meant to be accurate metrics. They've just been given to you so that we know exactly what you have analysed for this intersection or this particular road network. So please use the figures there. You may know that Harewood Road only has an AADT of 7,000, but we'd rather you use the metrics that we provide you there. So every particular design will have their own metrics, and yeah, just make sure that you're using those. So yeah, this is just an example of one of the designs that, or a design that you may get, and you need to go out there on site, have a look at how the existing intersection is working, do your matrix, and then reflect upon this design and think, okay, is this going to improve or make things worse for all of those crash types, and just analyze it within the safe system assessment matrix. So 2 matrices everyone should be completing, and a nice, beautiful graph for us to review at our end. Ken, have I missed anything?
You've done well there, Max. I think it's described everything pretty well. You mentioned the due date, did you?
We've got 2 weeks, so Friday the 3rd of December.
Yeah, so make sure if you're struggling, you get in contact with Max or myself. If you're struggling with what you should be doing, or if you've got particular questions, let's have a catch up about it. Next session, we've allocated a good bit of time for questions about your assignment, and also a bit of time to talk about the general policy and when you do safe system assessments and those sort of things, and how it would fit into the Wakakatahi process, or the local government processes, or those sorts of things. But if you've got questions, bring them along. Happy to chat them through there, or get in contact with Max or myself. But any other questions coming in, pop your hand up if you want to ask a question verbally, or type it in. Otherwise, we'll probably give you a couple of minutes now for you to do that final quiz and look at the swims, download your design, get yourself all prepared. If the site is just no good for you, you just go, well, I don't live in Dunedin anymore, or something like that. Just get in contact with us fairly early on, and we can alter it.
Fabulous. Or you can also just start your weekend early as well if you're.
Yeah, you have our permission to start your weekend as soon as we finish this webinar. All right. Well, thanks, Max. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Dan. Have a great weekend. See ya.